Welcome back, everyone, to A Gentleman's Life. And I thought I would do another quick video today. This is a video response to a recent video by Jeffrey McMahon. So if you haven't checked out his channel, check out his channel, Jeffrey McMahon. Always entertaining. And this one was even more entertaining to me than usual. Jeffrey McMahon's video was titled, Watch Obsessive Asks Questions for Which There Are No Answers. And I had to make some notes because it was too much. It was too much for me to handle. Let me tell you. It was a riot, to say the least. But to start off, I'm just finishing off my dinner, so I have a little bit of wine left, the last of the bottle that I started a day or so ago. And I have a nice bottle. In Germany, I've come to love this stuff from Gerolsteiner called Apple Spritzer. It's essentially a half fizzy water and half apple juice. Never thought I'd like anything to do with fizzy water, but this stuff is delicious. Delicious. So anyways, the moral of the story is I'm having a wisdom tooth pulled out tomorrow, and I'm on my last few minutes with food and drink, so I'm taking advantage. And today, I busted out my vintage, the Seiko 6105. I absolutely love the cushion case on this watch. And the fact that the only part in this watch that has been replaced so far is the crystal. And I have the original crystal, so really I have all original pieces. I love this thing. I was thinking about maybe passing it on, making some money, but it's just so beautiful. I can't do it right now. Just can't do it. So I actually am going to have a video specifically about this watch in the next month or so. I've gone all the way back. I've traced it back to the original owner, and I can follow the story of how it got to me. So I wanted to share that with you all sometime. But I need to get out my viewer response videos in the next week. I have a couple more video reviews and a comparison video I need to get out in the next week. So those all have to come out first, and then I'll work on this video. But anyways, back to my original topic. Video response to Jeffrey McMahon. So, Watch Obsessive asks questions for which there are no answers. And for me, the biggest point Jeff made that really resonated with me is that we really are in love with the idea that there is a sweet spot for the size of a collection. And I've come across this, and I always go back and forth. And you feel like there's a sweet spot where, you know, if I'm not below and I'm not above this number of watches, everything will be okay. But that's a delusion. And I really am I'm starting to think that way. Because I start to cut down, 6 to 8 watches or 10 or less watches. And I find that there's just other watches I want to have. But if I have too many watches, there's too many in it. It brings anxiety. Johnny Casual's brought that one up where like you have too many watches and it just makes you anxious. So there's this idea where there's a sweet spot, and we love the idea of this sweet spot, but I'm not really sure that sweet spot exists. I'm not sure that it actually does. And here's what's brought me to think about that, really, is that, there's always too many watches or too few watches in our collection. And I've realized, looking at my collection and the watches that are currently available today that I want to have, 6 to 8 watches is almost perfect for what I would like. I could cover everything I want in that number of watches. But that's not taking into account any of those classic vintage pieces that I would love to own. So for me, it's like if I go with that lower level sweet spot, then I'm giving up kind of those vintage, really vintage, like those classic, your 1960s and 70s Rolex Submariner, your 70s or 80s or 60s through 80s Omega Speedmaster. I love the old 36mm Rolex Explorer 1. there's just a few of these vintage pieces. Oh, the 1970s Tudor Monte Carlo. It's kind of that racing styled chronograph. Those are pieces where if I want to keep it to a certain size, I have to give them up. And I'm just not sure that I want to give up the experience of owning those pieces. But at the same time, I don't know that I want to give up some of the modern pieces I have and plan on buying. I don't know if I want to give those up to own the vintage pieces. So if I want to hit that sweet spot, there's got to be a give and take. Or I can go below the sweet spot and either own the vintage pieces or the newer pieces, or I can go above the sweet spot and own more watches and have both the vintage and the newer pieces. But I don't know how you can come across a point where you hit that sweet spot. And that's a big one for me, to be honest. It's a difficult one to handle, really. I really loved his Jeff's Goldilocks reference, because that's really true. Goldilocks, the porridge is always too hot or too cold. That's exactly how watch collecting is. That was just too much for me. I just about broke down in hilarity at that point. And the other great reference Jeff made was Icarus. And I think that really hits the truth of the matter, is we're always going to keep reaching for something. And it may be stepping up the ladder to a higher tier. It may be adding more watches than we intended. It doesn't have to always be stepping up the tier. It could be adding numbers or any number of things. But we're always going to keep reaching for that next thing. What I've found and what I've come to realize recently is that I'm okay with where my collection is at currently. So I was staring at my microphone for a minute. My beautiful microphone here. Another recent purchase to kind of produce better videos for all of the viewers. But anyways, I'm happy with where my collection is at this moment. And yes, there are, 1, 2, maybe 3, 2 or 3 current watches that I want to have for my collection and add on that I feel will complete that part of my collection. The problem is there's 2 or 3 vintage pieces that I also want to add over time to my collection that really speak to me. And I've really been able to whittle it down. And this actually helped. Johnny Casual, thank you for about a month ago looking at a view of my collection, because it helped me focus on narrowing down and then really thinking about the pieces that I really want to own. And I kind of broke it down into 2 categories of current modern, up to 10 years old versus new or shortly upcoming pieces versus vintage pieces. And I broke it down in those 2 categories. And I realized for current pieces, there's really 2 or 3 pieces I want to purchase. Otherwise, I'm happy with my collection at this point. I'm very happy with it. Now, those 2 or 3 pieces could take me 5 or 6 years to purchase at this point. But that's okay. No problem at all. But there's also 3 or 4, vintage pieces I really would like to own that will probably take me another 6 to 10 years to purchase on top of that. So it's blending those 2 things together. But the great thing about that is, considering the price point of most of these pieces, is I've given myself 10 or 15, 10 to 20 years of collecting. So I'm within a few months of turning 30. That means I have until I'm 40 or 45 or maybe even 50 to collect all of these pieces. And then at that point, my collection is complete, and I just save for kind of that one really high-end hot horology piece that I would never have purchased otherwise. But, if I'm 40 or 45 and I feel complete with my collecting, then it's worth saving for one of those pieces. And I can save for 10 or 15 years for one single watch. But at the same time, it's like that balancing act of feeling like you have too few watches versus too many watches, and it's almost like a manufactured or pseudo sweet spot, if you will. And I just thought it was a really interesting topic, Jeff. So I'll link Jeff's channel in my description below. I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts on this. What I've found is you always seem to have too many or too few watches. And until you get down the road towards the end of your collecting, you always feel that way. And I'm doing all of this under the assumption that maybe there's new stuff that comes out over the next 10 years that really takes my fancy. And the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 watches that are on my list now, maybe something else comes up. But without anything else coming up, there's still 4 or 5 watches that I want to purchase, and it's a mix of new and vintage. So it's just a really difficult thing, and I feel like you're always in this balancing act. So I'm really starting to ramble now, but I would love to hear what you all think. So leave comments below, or a video response. I would love to hear what you have to say on the subject. But in my opinion, yeah, we're always going back and forth, and there is no complete answer for those questions that we ask. So excellent video, Jeff. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else has enjoyed this. I await your responses. Until next time.